Welcome to another video from Ihsan Arabic. I'm here with Ella.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Hi. Okay, so today we're going to be speaking about gender and how that affects the Arabic language. When English speakers start to study a modern foreign language, whether that's Arabic, Spanish, French, etc., they often, you'll come to this quite early, this idea of gender. And we've been speaking about nouns in our previous videos, and gender is really at the heart of our study of nouns. Fun fact for you guys, a lot of people say, there's no gender in the English language, but I know one example that, maybe a past relic. We do actually have an element of gender in the English language, and that's in the word blonde. And if you've ever felt like, I'm not sure if it's blonde or blonde with an E, then you can tell yourself now that they're both right. Because if I was to say a blonde boy, I'd say a blonde boy, I'd write it like this without the E. And if I was to write a blonde girl, then I could write it like this with the E. And so what we're seeing here is based on the gender of the word, the spelling is different. In English, the pronunciation isn't any different, but it's an interesting introduction to how gender is important in language. But let's start by looking at how this affects Arabic. So, would you like to talk about this slide, Ella?
Right, so here we have an example of a masculine noun and a feminine noun. And their meaning's the same, but we use one to refer to a male student. Here we're talking about students. So one is referring to a male student and the other is referring to a female student. So let me read through them and then we can discuss actually what's the difference between the two. So a male student we say is طالب, طالب. And a female student in Arabic is طالبة, طالبة. And if you were to, you can also hear, sometimes it said طالبة. Sometimes if they don't read the word fully, you'll also hear that. You'll hear طالبة.
Yes. So in essence, what are the primary differences between the two? I mean, I'm seeing another letter at the end, the ta marbuta. Is there anything else that's different?
Right, so we can think about that masculine noun as maybe the standard noun. And then to make that feminine, what we do is we add the ta marbuta, which is the ta, which is this closed ta. And then to the letter before it, which was the last letter of the word, we add a fatha. And it's always going to be like that. Yes.
And that dammatain, which previously was on the ba here, if we look at the masculine example, has hopped over now to the ta marbuta at the end. And that's really important. So the two major differences are the addition of the ta marbuta, which is often referred to as the feminine marker, and then the addition of a fatha over what used to be the final letter and is now the penultimate letter. Now, as we can see, this is really quite simple to understand when we're talking about people, because it's quite easy to see or quite easy to understand the difference between a male or a female. But when gender sort of goes on to cover things, objects, ideas, etc., it becomes a little bit harder to differentiate between the two. So we've got two nouns here. We've got the word for a lesson, which we can say is darsun. And then we have the word for a car, which is sayyaratun. Now, is there anything inherently masculine about a lesson, Ella?
Not that I'm aware of. And I always ask my students this. I say, is there anything that you find particularly feminine about a car? And no one's really said yes or been able to come up with anything that marks out as being feminine. So,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the time with objects, with things, or like you even said, ideas in Arabic, we wouldn't intuitively know. There's no way to know that something is going to be masculine or feminine. But most of the time, we'll be able to see it.
Ah,
So,
okay.
in that sense, it's actually, it's all right for us, I'd say.
So what? So I've just come across the word for dars.
Mm-hmm.
I think I checked. There's nothing masculine or feminine that I can see about a lesson. What would I look for to see what gender it is?
Well, the moment you see that tarmabuta, you know it's feminine. So
Ah, okay.
you can assume a word is masculine. That's what I say. Assume the word is masculine, unless
Yeah.
here it has a tarmabuta. And there's another reason which we'll discuss in a second. But the moment you see that tarmabuta, you know it's a feminine word. You need to treat it as feminine. Keep in mind that it's feminine. So that's the important thing.
Yeah, and as a teacher, I'm all about getting students to maximize the knowledge that they have. So if we were to stop the class here, and you just separated nouns into two groups: those that have ta marbuta and those that don't have it, and that's how you base your masculine and feminine nouns, then you do pretty well as a Arabic speaker just with that rule in mind. But if you want to get extra, but add another detail to that, another layer, then we can look at it in this way. And here we have on the board, we have a diagram, and let's just focus on the two circles on either side to start with. The first one, you've got feminine by meaning. And then you've got feminine by mark. Now, could you explain to me what feminine by meaning means there, Ella?
Right. So we see, well, let's focus on the words that are there. So the first word is bintun, bintun, which means girl, a girl. And then we have Zainab. Zainabu, Zainab, we all know a Zainab. Yeah. So referring to a female or a woman or a girl. So it's feminine by meaning because these words are referring to a woman, girl, a female person. And so another great example, of course, is ummun. Ummun is the word for mother. It doesn't have a tarmabuta, right? But there's no way that word is going to be masculine. I'm sorry, it's mother. It's a feminine word in its meaning, in its inherent meaning.
Yeah. So, it's like you look at a word, you say, oh, no, tarmabuta. Well, mother is feminine. A girl is feminine. Also, the word for sister, ukhtun. It's interesting how a lot of the family words for the female members of the family are without the normal feminine marker. If we go over now to the other column, feminine by mark, we'll see words which we've covered. One word we've covered before, sayyaratun. Yeah, it's not feminine by meaning. It's a car. There's nothing inherently feminine about it. But because it has that tat marbuta, yes, I can say for sure that is a feminine word. If we go down to qittatun, they're the word for a cat. Again, you could have a girl or boy cat there. And, that's an interesting example, actually, because in essence, if I did want to say a tomcat, I could just remove that tat marbuta. So in essence, you could say that word is a little bit of both. But most people, when they say the word qittatun, they're not thinking about the gender of a cat. It's just a cat. So
the standard word for a cat is with the tarmabuta.
Yeah,
you don't often know the gender, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the mark there that is important, and we do have a circle in the middle, and that there is for words which fit into both categories. So can you think of an example which would be both feminine by meaning and feminine by mark?
Well, we have so many girls' names that end in tarmabuta. So, for example, Khadija too. It has a tarmabuta, and when we speak, actually, we don't hear it because we say Khadija, Fatima, well, there's more, of course, Asia. So these we don't actually hear, but so many girls' names end in that tar marbuta, and that makes them feminine in their meaning and, of course, by the mark as well.
Yeah, and I'm really also fascinated by how even words which aren't Arabic seem to end in the ta marbuta. Like you have Maria, or Anna, or Ella. So often names which aren't Arabic come, they have almost, it sounds like they ended in the ta marbuta. So perhaps it's something we like to end, something about femininity we see with that final sound. Now, there's also another example.
Yeah, we can return to طالبة, which we had at the start, which is referring to a female student. So it's feminine meaning, and it has a tar marbuta, so it's feminine by the mark as well.
Yeah, طالبة, this word here, it fits into both categories. Now, again, if you start the class here, you now even have even more of an understanding, which you could go away with and apply to the Arabic language. And I think when I first teach this to students, this is where I leave them, because right now they have, in 90% of circumstances, they're going to get it right. You're going to get it right. And if you got it wrong with this information, and you came across an irregularity in the language, no one's going to be too hard on you, because the other irregularities are slightly harder to predict. And we'll just briefly go into them now.
And they're quite rare. So these exceptions of, like, you can see irregular feminine nouns, there's a handful. I mean, if you consider how many words there are in Arabic, they're quite common, but it's a rare thing. I would say it's probably like in the dozens, these exceptions.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that I can tell you straight off, it's quite a memorable one, is body parts that come in pairs. So body parts in pairs. And, by that we're talking about, I've got 2 hands, got 2 ears, 2 eyes, etc. So I can add that: hands, ears, eyes, and all of these body parts in their singular form. If I would just say a hand, which the word is yadun, that word would be feminine, even though it doesn't exhibit ta marbuta, and in meaning it's not. There's nothing really feminine about it. Can you think of any other irregular feminine groups there?
Quite a lot of words in nature. So, and one that I like to point out, of course, is the word for earth, ardun, because we say Mother Nature. So this idea of it, the earth being feminine, is a concept, I would say, that we find across languages. And then what else? Wind, for example.
Yeah.
Ardun, rihun, these words.
Yeah. So something that people say about ways that we can look at this is that things that carry other things can often be seen as feminine. And we had the example of a car earlier, and the earth, and
another example of that I quite like is Jannah.
Jannah.
And Jahannam. Jahannam is an irregular one. Jahannam is actually, it doesn't have a tar marbuta, but it's feminine. And we can see that things that contain other things, that can carry things, sometimes are feminine. So that's one thread that people have found across this, but it's just a theory at the end of the day.
Yeah, and these threads are really useful to students, so make the most use of them. And the best way to use these threads, like nature, etc., is just to be, take them with a pinch of salt. It doesn't work every time, but it actually works a surprisingly amount. Surprisingly, it's quite frequent. It works. Okay, so I think another thing we can look at is the word harb. The war is one that sticks out to me as interesting. There's nothing, it's kind of on its own there. Why is that feminine? Now, all of these irregular feminine nouns, I would say, if you're just starting off, if this is the first time you've heard about masculine and feminine nouns in Arabic, I would say stop at the previous slide, learn that, get used to that first, and don't worry about any of the irregular examples we've given, because you can pick them up over time. And as I said, if you make a mistake with the irregular examples, no one's going to be too hard on you. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today to our video about gender and in Arabic, and we plan to cover lots more topics. We've also got some other videos if you want to check those out, which cover other interesting and sort of fundamental grammar concepts in Arabic. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and check us out on Instagram, and we've also got a website too. So see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.